Well, good morning, and thanks, Eric and Manny. A little bit quieter morning than we had for many people here yesterday with thunderstorms moving through the area, but we are in an active weather pattern right now. It's a little bit of a change from what we saw during the last week with a lot of warmer than normal conditions. I will start just by noting here, and if you looked at the radar and you were watching yesterday, especially across southern and central lower, there was an awful lot of activity, a lot of warnings. But when we throw all of the damage reports and so forth together collectively, I think it's some good news. The damage was less than one would typically anticipate with that type of an event. These are the storm reports that we have so far. There's still some coming in, but most of the severe weather yesterday was high winds. There was also some reports of hail, including some 1 inch hail here in the local area in the East Lansing area, but that was more the exception than the rule. And you can see it was part of an outbreak to our south and east that occurred yesterday as a cold front moved through the area so in a pretty typical springtime situation, with cold air moving into much warmer, humid air and the thunderstorms resulting. But again, I think it could have been certainly probably worse than it was. Still some people without power, unfortunately, this morning, but a much quieter day expected here today as we'll look at our forecast in just a moment. For the past week, starting with our temperatures, no surprise here, much warmer than normal once again here for the previous week, with our departures ranging from generally from 8 to as much as 12 degrees Fahrenheit above normal. And a lot of that has been over the last several days when we've had high temperatures, many locations in the state at or above 70 degrees. Precipitation depended on where you were, with totals ranging from less than a quarter of an inch across far western sections of the state to more than 2 inches in the east. And a lot of this was, well, there have been two big weather systems that moved through, the one yesterday and then the one previously several days ago. That was mainly across the eastern half of lower Michigan, but widespread rainfall with that one. And it has changed things, certainly in the eastern part of lower Michigan with regard to soil moisture, where some of these heavy rainfall totals have made a significant difference or made it pretty wet once again. I wanted to show something here regarding, and this follows up on many of Manny's comments here and looking at planting, but soil conditions, just typical in Michigan, we saw things improve fairly significantly and steadily last week. Several different pieces on here, but on the upper left hand, these are air temperatures in the red line here, and then soil temperatures at 2 inches at our EnviroWeather site in East Lansing here on campus. And you can see that with those 70-degree days, our 2 inch soil temperatures warmed generally from the low 50s up into the mid and upper 50s during the course of the week. So there was a response there. You can see that and that's in the light brown down here below, that's in a bar format, but you can see it lags behind a few hours behind the air temperatures. But there's no question that the soil temperatures did respond with the warm week. And in Michigan, on the upper right-hand side here, that leaves us generally, these are average temperatures, 2 inch bare soil temperatures now in many parts of the state in the 50s, even some 60s across. These were as of yesterday, but and this happens many times in Michigan, we are looking at a cooler type of weather pattern here now moving into the next several days and better part of a week. Moisture-wise, it as usually is the case, and depends on where you are and what soils you're dealing with. But on the bottom here, this is looking at soil moisture in the top 16 inches of the profile nationally. But in Michigan, conditions range from at or maybe even a little bit drier than normal across central and western lower Michigan. Again, depends on how much precip you had, to wetter than normal. And that's definitely the case as you move into east central and southeastern lower Michigan, where the blues show up there. That indicates that, again, the moisture in that top 16 inches is a little bit more or greater than normal. So it just, again, depends on where you are, but we definitely had a response in soil temperatures here this past week with the warm weather. That's not surprising. Now, in terms of the outlook, We are in an active weather pattern here, at least for the next day or so. We had the precipitation with the system that went through yesterday was actually somewhat less. The storms were individual storms were moving fairly quickly, so most areas got something on the order of a quarter of an inch. There were some heavier totals embedded in that, but most areas did not see quite as much as they normally might with a weather system like that. But that said, we have a third weather system that's approaching here from the last week. That's off to our south and west. You can see it on the weather map here down over south central Kansas. It's an area of low pressure with an associated frontal boundary. That will make its way towards us during the day today, but mainly tonight, overnight, and into early tomorrow morning. So for most areas, we'll see variably cloudy skies here today, a little bit cooler than it was yesterday, breezy. Another windy day is expected here, but we'll see rain develop here by the southwest corner, probably very late afternoon, but most areas here this evening, and especially late evening into the overnight hours. Looking at, for most areas here, probably a quarter to half an inch across, let's call it roughly the southern 2/3 of the state, a little bit less than that as you go north into upper Michigan, but this will be a fairly widespread rain. Most areas will get, and it will be sort of a steady rain. There might be a couple of embedded rumbles of thunder here and there, but this is not any kind of nothing like what we saw yesterday, but generally a nice steady rain that will last for several hours. And then tonight, this is the weather map for 8 p.m. tonight. You can see the low pressure gets close here. Central Illinois, that's when we'll really start to see that precip move southwest and northeast across the state. And by tomorrow morning, the front goes through, the system goes off to our east, and it's replaced by high pressure. So tomorrow, we will see cooler conditions behind that front, and even cooler than that on Saturday. This is a Canadian origin air mass, so it will be noticeably cooler and windy, as well as this. There are a lot of differences in pressure between the high and the low pressure, so it will be yet again another very, very windy day. Exception to most areas will be dry. Northern parts of the state, we could still see some lingering showers, especially across upper Michigan, and it could be in liquid form. That also could be cold enough that a few snowflakes to mix in. That will probably come to an end though by late tomorrow or early Saturday at the latest. But we are looking definitely at a cooling trend over the next 2 days. And then finally on Saturday, and this is a little bit different map format here, high pressure across the state, but that cold air mass is in place. We will see, it's important to note here, even though we're a little early, haven't had much planted yet, but we will see frost and freezing temperatures, especially across northern parts of the state here, beginning tonight and then continuing into the weekend. And especially, I think Sunday morning will be the coldest morning of all these, especially we look across central and southern parts of the state. Probably we'll see some temperatures down around freezing. We're not expecting a really widespread hard freeze type of condition, but definitely northern parts of the state, away from the lakes, we probably will see some upper 20s there, and more low and mid 30s as we head south. But certainly, I think Sunday morning with relatively clear, calm conditions expected overnight, we probably will see quite a bit of frost out there. Just a heads up for it's, and certainly that is well within our climatology. We expect that this time of the year. It's not unusual at all for the third week or so in April, but that we will have that threat over the weekend before warming. Another little bit of a warming trend sets up by late Sunday and into Monday and the next week. But that said, next week, looking at the medium range forecast guidance. Oh, here's the forecast minimum temperatures here for Sunday, the 21st. This again probably will be the coldest morning of all, and you can see most areas here again ranging from the upper 20s in the northern part of the interior upper peninsula down into the low 30s, maybe a couple upper 20s in some inland areas in northern Michigan, northern lower Michigan as well. But that's probably going to be the coldest morning, possibly a little bit remaining on Monday morning, but then warmer after that. Precip over the next week here, after the precipitation here tonight and tomorrow, most areas remaining dry until the early part of next week. So the next chance for significant precip right now looks like it would be late Monday or Tuesday. Right now, probably fairly high confidence that will be another fairly widespread type precip event, but that's timing wise what we'll be looking for the next one. And then that will drag a little bit more, another cooler air mass into the area, into the region. And so we're expecting next week will be somewhat unsettled and probably cooler than normal with a gradual moderating trend and warmer as we get towards the end of the weekend. And that's what here I'll end up or start to wrap up here. Looking at the medium range forecast guidance, it does, the jet stream forecasts suggest pretty much a transitional type of flow, progressive pattern. So we don't stay in any one place very long, but ultimately most of this guidance suggests that by late next week and the following week for the end of April, early May, that we start to see troughing out in the west and ridging over the east. We've seen that pattern many times here over the last several weeks and even months. And what that means ultimately is that we'll probably go back to warmer than normal conditions here by the last week of the month. Fairly good confidence in that. Note also down in the lower right-hand side here, also suggests a fairly active storm track through the middle of part of the country. So precip is predicted or expected to be at least normal, if not even above normal. So again, if we look at this in terms of the time of the year, the calendar, and what needs to be done, it's not the ideal forecast, but at least, again, the temperatures probably will be on the increase. I think that's one of the biggest messages here, but we're going to have to use those opportunity windows when they arise. Because this one, we think about the last few days, and again, there were opportunities there just at the very beginning of things, and now Mother Nature's given us a little bit of a curveball with this recent change, but it's temporary. And so after several days, again, I think things will gradually improve by the latter part of next week, at least in terms of temperature. One last thing with that, and you probably have noticed this, but when we have our high temperatures up above 70 degrees with a nice breeze and some good sunshine during the day, the evaporation rates are higher than they typically are in the spring, and that does make a definite difference in terms of that topsoil condition and how fast it dries off or allows traffic or allows operations to begin. So keep an eye on that. We probably will see some of that once again here, especially as we get towards the latter part of next week and beyond. And so that's a wrap up here. We are back to a pretty unsettled pattern, certainly cooler for the short term, but then with a long-term moderation in temperatures after that. And we'll have some new long lead outlooks here for next week that I'm not expecting any big changes, but we'll have a look at that on the next briefing. And so with that, I'm going to introduce next week's speaker. And it's one some of you may have met, may have not, but it's Abby Smith from USDA's NRCS. She's our state agronomist, and she's going to be with us to talk about conservation practices for soil health. And that's next Thursday morning, the 25th of April. So don't miss that. And with that, I'm going to hand it off to Phil to talk about RUP. Thanks.